In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to work with buttons. So, just like always, we start in app module, and here we import MD button module. And now let's import this with the auto import plugin. Beautiful. Now let's go to app component.html. Here I'm going to add a plain HTML5 button. Let's call this button 1. And with this, we get something like this. Pretty boring and ugly. So let's give this a modern look and feel. In Angular material, we have a number of directives that we can apply to our buttons to give them the material design look and feel. So the first one is MD-button. Let's have a look. Now, I personally don't like this because it doesn't really look like a button. It looks like text. However, when we hover it, we get this effect, and when we click it, we get this animation. But once again, by default, it doesn't really look like a button, and I personally recommend you not to use this directive. So now let's take a look at another directive. I'm going to duplicate this line. This time I'm going to use MD raised button. And now let's change the label to button 2. And here's the result. This is much better. Okay. Now by default, the background color of this button is based on the background color of our theme. So this theme we have applied here, its background color is white. That's why the background color of this button is white. But we can change this. We can simply apply the color attribute. And here we have 3 options: primary, accent, and warn. If you have worked with Bootstrap, you have seen the same concept there. So in Bootstrap, we have primary, secondary, danger, and so on. So let me set the color of this button to primary and also change the label to primary. Now let's duplicate this a couple of times. And this time I'm going to use accent and finally warn. And also let's change the labels accordingly. So these are our 3 beautiful buttons based on the current theme. Now, what if you don't like these colors? What if instead of this blue-purple for the primary button, you want your primary buttons to look green? Well, there are 2 ways to achieve this. One way is to use CSS, but that's something I recommend you not to do because you want your entire application to have a common and consistent look and feel. If you have that green used in your button, chances are that green should be used somewhere else as well. That's why in Angular material, we have this concept called theme, where we define all the colors in our application. And that's something we're going to look at later in this section. So for now, don't worry about changing these colors. Just be aware that you can set the color of a button using the color attribute. Now we have another kind of button. So let me duplicate this last line. I'm going to remove the color attribute and change this directive to MD fab. What is fab? Well, I used to think it's fabulous because these buttons are really fabulous, but it actually stands for floatable action button. These are round buttons that have an icon inside. So we don't add a label here. Instead, we add an icon, MD-icon. Let's use the check icon. Now back in the browser. So this is our fab. Now the icon here should actually be white, but it's purple because in the last lecture, I changed the color of our icons to purple. So let's go to app.css. So see, this is why I said you shouldn't apply a style like this because this is very generic and it can impact various elements in the template for this component. So let's delete this. Now back in the browser. Now our icon is white. Also, just like the raised buttons, you can change the color of fabs using the color attribute. So we can come back to this app component.html and set this color for our fab. Let's change this to primary. And with this, we get this kind of blue-purple button.